Senator Merkley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Trump tax law slashed the corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%, but that didn't trickle down to ordinary people. Rather than raising wages, corporations rewarded CEOs. They did stock buybacks, increasing the wealth of wealthy stockholders. An analysis from the IMF found that the top S&P 500 companies directed just 20% of the value of that tax cut towards capital expenditures or research and development, and put 80%, 4 out of every $5, to buybacks and dividends. And yet the Washington Post reports just last Friday that Trump wants to continue that strategy of cutting the corporate rate even further. So, Mr. Hausman, how would such a cut actually help small business and their employees when we saw that really what the tax cuts were designed under Trump were about helping mega corporations and wealthy stockholders?
Yes. So, from the union's perspective, these smaller unionized companies that we work with day to day. They pay their taxes, they produce a good, and then they provide it out to a larger the economy. And when you have these sorts of tax incentives to build out in low tax havens, and you have a capability through hiring legal and tax advice, you just create this perverse incentive for for regular American workers who don't feel like there's a fair competition. And I think that that's ultimately what we try and address here with no tax breaks for outsourcing and other areas, is that these issues like GILTI and others, they need to be updated. We need to address we need to approach this from like a constant movement towards improving our revenue to spending ratio, and it needs to be done in a timely fashion, which is really like something that the union workers do every 3 years when they bargain a contract.
Well, I sure would like to see ordinary Americans benefit rather than more tax policy directed to make the wealthy wealthier. And I don't see how doing the same thing that provides 80% of the benefits to the wealthiest is going to serve ordinary Americans. I wanted, and you mentioned that GILTI provision, which is also a provision that really helps drive our production overseas, which means even less good employment here in America. So if you want corporations to make their products overseas, that would be a very good policy, but I prefer that we make our products here and employ Americans. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, for a union that has spent 1 in 4 anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders, that is because United Steelworkers have been a supporter of it. We've had to fight back against dumped and subsidized goods that have negatively impacted jobs here in the United States for decades. And the idea that tax policy could incentivize further outsourcing is absolutely atrocious. We should be using that revenue to generate and build American factories, not factories somewhere else.
Dr. Klussing, let me turn to you. The U.S. collects less in corporate tax revenues as a share of GDP than virtually any other advanced economy. How does that disparity in corporate taxation under the Trump tax law contribute to increased wealth inequality here in the United States?
Yes, the corporate tax is a very progressive tax, and if you compare it to our other ways of raising revenue, like labor income taxes, the payroll tax, it's by far the most progressive major contributor to our tax system. So when they cut that corporate tax so dramatically in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and if you look at the other provisions of the act, they were also regressive. It exacerbated the amount of income inequality in the United States. And that same NBER study that was referenced in the opening Grassley remarks finds that 80% of the benefit of those corporate tax cuts went to the top 10% of the population.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that there is a profound sense of the system being rigged, which increases cynicism in America, because we know that a large corporation uses a tremendous amount of the infrastructure built with our tax dollars, of our criminal justice system, of our trade system, of our education system, of all the people that hire. So isn't there something fundamentally unfair to have these massively wealthy corporations use a massive amount of our infrastructure and pay almost nothing towards sustaining it and improving it?
Yes, and I would point out that it's also inefficient. If you look at the largest companies, most of what they're earning is above normal profits, and those profits can be taxed without distorting labor decisions or investment decisions because they're earning above it and beyond the normal amount that it takes to get their businesses to function. So I think moving the corporate tax base even more in the direction of a pure profits tax would be helpful, but it's an efficient way to raise revenue in addition to being a fair way to raise revenue.
Thank you.
Senator Kane.